From living a life that was built upon the riches of drug money to spending their days in a stone-cold room behind iron bars, these are the reactions of drug dealers getting life sentences for wanting to live off dirty and fast money.
Disclaimer.
This is convicted drug lord Jose Cavilla Jimenez. According to the police, Jimenez was involved in a heroin trafficking business run by a Mexican cartel, bringing over 100 kilograms of the drug into Columbus each month. The investigation resulted in the seizure of 25 kilos of heroin, which was worth an unbelievable $2.5 million. Jimenez appeared in court in the Franklin County courtroom to be sentenced after entering a guilty plea to 2 charges of trafficking and 1 count of engaging in corrupt activity. Assistant Prosecutor Dan Stanley begins the hearing by making Jimenez's high-ranking position within the operation abundantly clear. He also speaks of the fear-inducing power of the cartel and the difficulties this poses when trying to obtain convictions against gang members. All the while, Jimenez maintains his stance, standing bolt upright while glaring into the distance.
This is the ringleader of an organization that is so fear-inspiring that the people who come here from Mexico refuse to testify against it because they know as soon as they are born, their family will be murdered in Mexico.
A female witness, who's not shown on camera to protect her identity, testifies in court about how she assisted him in storing and distributing heroin around the Columbus region.
He was bringing me the drugs to my house.
What kind of drugs?
Heroin.
How much?
1 kilo, and the last time 2 kilos.
The ringleader has been entirely unapologetic thus far, but as he speaks to the court through an interpreter, his lack of regret will become evident. His translator manages to make his words sound more human in English than they were spoken by him in Spanish. Judge Kimberly Coft, however, doesn't buy any of his pitiful remorse before sentencing Jimenez to 21 years in prison. In addition, she mandates that the drug lord be deported right away after being let go. Jimenez simply walks out of the courthouse with a look of disdain on his face, not even acknowledging that he will soon turn 70 when he is released. Jimenez's utter lack of feeling is unsettling, and Dexter Lee Williams exhibits a similar level of catatonic coldness in the following case. The 53-year-old kingpin, who was found guilty on 3 charges of breaking the Racketeer and Corrupt Organizations Act, is set to receive his punishment at Houston County Superior Court shortly. Williams was charged with narcotics trafficking, which led to his conviction. According to the police, he was in charge of a multi-million-dollar trafficking ring that ran from Mexico to Atlanta. He was in possession of 39 kilograms of cocaine, estimated to be worth $3.5 million, when he was hauled into jail. Here he is, after his arrest, in the back of the police car, laughing and talking to himself.
Son of a bitch, they thought me had passed. I should have never walked into that fucking house.
Judge Bo Adams, who was sentencing Williams, had harsh words for the man who was just sitting there without any emotion. Judge Adams may not have affected Williams, but his defense lawyer Wanda Jackson is clearly becoming upset at what the judge said, and it appears that the defendant's realization has finally come to pass. For him, the sentencing is not going well. Wanda Jackson has heard enough. She attempts to scold him for insinuating that her defense case was filled with wild accusations, but the judge cuts her off and goes on his speech. Williams is ultimately given a sentence of 40 years without parole by Judge Adams, and not even the possibility of serving the remainder of his life behind bars will provoke some response from the ruthless dealer.
Mr. Williams, you're convicted not because I'm corrupt or underhanded, or law enforcement is racist, or the jury had unauthorized contact with witnesses. You're convicted because you're guilty. That's the plain and simple truth of it. The evidence showed that, the wiretaps show that, and at the end of it all, for count 1, I will sentence Mr. Williams to 20 years to serve.
Bigger allegedly trafficked a sizable pipeline of prescription medications through northern Michigan's Unum County. Thousands of morphine pills and other prohibited prescriptions were obtained from a Sagan doctor as a part of a scheme, and Bigger sold them at several places throughout the county. But even with the almost $225,000 he made from the spoils of his illicit TR, Bigger was barely making ends meet while residing in practical poverty in a camper van parked in his daughter's driveway. The 71-year-old maintained his confrontational attitude throughout his trial, adamantly claiming his innocence and criticizing both his attorney and the criminal justice system in general. He repeatedly attempted to have his attorney fired and maintained that he was being set up by the police. In the end, he was found guilty of the most serious allegation under Michigan's racketeering laws, that of conducting a criminal enterprise.
I believe the judge is biased, and I said from the start, Andrew County would not give me a fair trial. And I did not get a fair trial.
The judge lays out the deplorable living conditions and resentful character of the elderly drug lord without holding back.
Did you live a big lifestyle? Were you sitting out next to the cement pond with the BMW parked in the driveway? No, you weren't. You lived a pretty crummy lifestyle, time to time, in a camper in your daughter's front driveway, but it didn't stop you from being manipulative. It didn't stop you from abusing other people.
The drug dealer keeps up his flamboyant appearance of innocence. He then continues to voice his dissatisfaction with his attorney and even accuses Judge Rogers of prejudice, all the while reiterating his claim that he was not given a fair trial. The prosecution team ignores his feeble admissions, claiming that he was Unum County's primary pill distributor and pleading with the judge to impose the maximum penalty. Bigger will probably never see the light of day again because Judge Rogers finally convicts him to a minimum of 20 years total.
I am sentencing you to 180 to 360 months on charge number 1, giving you 187 days credit on that charge. Consecutive to that and concurrent to each other will be the sentences on charges 2 through 6. On charge 2, the controlled substance delivery charge, it's 23 to 240 months. Identical sentence on charges 3 and 4, 23 to 240 months. On the maintaining a drug house, it's 16 to 24 months. And on conducting the criminal enterprise, that's 50 to 240 months.
The 25-year-old drug dealer Aaron Andrade is in court today for sentencing after admitting his part in the overdose death of 29-year-old Kristen Coutu. Shortly before her death, Coutu had left an inpatient drug treatment clinic because her insurance would not pay for more than 30 days of therapy. She made plans to purchase narcotics from Andrade the day before she passed away, but she was unaware that the heroin the dealer provided had been tainted with a lethal amount of fentanyl. Judge Kristen Rogers hears statements from the prosecution over the type of evidence used against Andrade during the sentencing process, and the defendant admits that the facts of the case are true.
Your Honor, this defendant stands before you indicted on, among others, the count of murder for, as the state alleges, delivering a substance containing fentanyl which killed Kristen Coutu.
The mother of Kristen Coutu then makes an emotional impact statement describing how horrifying it was to learn that her daughter had overdosed.
There were 2 Cranston police officers standing there. All I could say repeatedly was, "Please don't tell me my daughter is dead. Please don't tell me my daughter is dead."
Following the impact statements, Andrade stands to speak. Unlike most prisoners, Andrade expresses regret and acknowledges that his acts have caused the Coutu family much suffering. He also accepts full responsibility for his conduct.
The actions that I did that day, I never meant to hurt nobody. And I know I hurt a lot of people, including her family and my family, because we're all going through this.
Judge Rogers sentences Andrade to 40 years with 20 years to serve after he is found guilty despite his contrite statements. Charles Crosty is awaiting punishment in Clement County Court on allegations of corruption and drug trafficking. After being found in possession of $5,000 worth of heroin and cocaine meant for the streets of New Richmond, the 35-year-old was found guilty on 12 counts. Crosty has a lengthy criminal past that dates back to when he was 14. According to the authorities, he started his dealing empire barely 4 months after being freed from jail for heroin trafficking. Assistant Prosecutor Darren Miller tries to convince Judge Thomas Herman of the degree of Crosty's harm to the community at the beginning of the hearing.
Heroin is bad enough, but laced with fentanyl, it becomes a game of Russian roulette. And individuals like Charles Crosty provide the weapon, they provide the bullet, and they spin the chamber, pointing at the addict's head, and all the addict has to do is pull the trigger. That's who Charles Crosty is.
Authorities claim that during the defendant's active years, the amount of heroin laced with fentanyl on the streets caused a sharp increase in overdoses and drug-related deaths. Although Crosty's drug-dealing antics are outrageous in and out of themselves, the court is taken aback by what Police Chief Rand Harvey has to say about forcing addicts to sell his products.
They would have black eyes or their face would be swollen, and I would ask them, how did this occur? And they would frankly tell me that Charles Crosty and his associates would beat them.
Crosty seemingly couldn't care less about his horrific actions being laid bare to the court. Judge Herman continues to give the offender a blank gaze as he goes over his extensive criminal history before imposing a 20-year and 9-month jail sentence. When the severe sentence is delivered, Crosty doesn't even bat an eyelid. Residents of New Richmond may now relax knowing that their town will be safer for a very long time. Some even decide to make it a family business like the following case. This is Marquez Johnson, and this is Rashad Johnson. The Jacksonville siblings were found guilty of narcotics trafficking and possession counts simultaneously at trial, and now they are coming before Duval County Judge R. Anthony Salem for sentencing, due to the fact that both guys were recognized as the leaders of the vicious 1200 Out East gang trap house on Jacksonville's east side. The Johnson family enters the witness box before sentencing to request leniency, informing the judge that the men had 7 children between them.
Okay. And he's a family man?
He is.
And do you feel he's a good father?
He's a great father.
Okay.
He gave birth to his own baby in a car. He's an amazing father.
Then the brothers take it in turns to address the judge, declaring himself just a guy who has made a mistake. Rashad throws himself at Judge Salem's mercy, and Marquez also denies any affiliation with gang activities.
I'm not a bad person. I'm not a monster. I'm not a gang member. Just a human being who made mistakes.
I made some mistakes in my life I'm not proud of. I want to move forward with my life and become the best version of myself that I can be.
It doesn't sit well with the prosecutors, who contend that the Johnson brothers had numerous chances to mend their ways, but persisted in their gang-related behavior.
Growing up in the neighborhood, there wasn't a lot of opportunities. They wanted to be involved in the community. There was talk about opening a center for kids in the community. Instead of doing that, instead of doing things to benefit their community, they banded together with other gang members and opened up a trap house. These defendants are grown men who made their own decisions.
The judge's sentencing takes the courtroom by surprise. As the brothers get a heavy 30-year sentence, the men's supporters can be heard sobbing aloud in the public galley. Despite the distress experiences by the men's relatives, the brothers appear to be accepting their 30-year sentence. Without a hint of regret, Rashad turns to wave goodbye to his family as he is escorted out of the courtroom. While some sentences are harsh, none of them compare to what Robert Lloyd Schellenberg had to endure after being discovered to be a narcotics trafficker in China. Schellenberg tried to smuggle 222 kilograms of methamphetamine to Australia from Ceylon. The Canadian man left and took a plane to Thailand after realizing that his translator had told Chinese authorities he was a drug courier. Later, during the plane's layover at an airfield in the province of Guangdong, he was taken into custody. Schellenberg faced charges and was given a 15-year prison sentence, despite his insistence that he was simply an innocent tourist who was unlucky enough to be set up by a drug dealer. After filing an appeal, he was given permission for a new trial, which happened a few months later. During his second trial, we see him from a different perspective than in his first trial, where he was charged with accessory crimes. At this point, the prosecution appears to be doing all out to prove that Schellenberg was a major player in the trafficking. Schellenberg is once more found guilty, and while his punishment is being read out, he undoubtedly wishes he had kept quiet and spent the full 15 years. The presiding judge, Q Chun, is not holding back as she gives Schellenberg the death penalty. Indeed, death.
对，判处死刑，并处没收个人全部财产。
The sentencing is widely publicized by Chinese official media. When Schellenberg realizes what the judge just said, he makes a gesture and displays a devastated expression. The look on his face when he tries to accept his penalty betrays his complete perplexity. Schellenberg files an appeal against the death penalty, but the court denies his request. Schellenberg is still incarcerated in China as of 2023 and could soon be executed. Felix Dorfin, a 35-year-old Frenchman, was found guilty of smuggling 3 kilograms of illicit substances into Indonesia after he was apprehended at the airport in Lombok, carrying a bag containing amphetamines and ecstasy. Afterwards, he managed to get away and ran for 2 weeks before being apprehended again. Given that Indonesia has some of the worst drug regulations in the world, even though Dorfin was only carrying a small amount of drugs, he still faces harsh penalties. Prosecutors requested a $700,000 fine and a 20-year prison sentence during his trial. Although it's a harsh punishment, Dorfin is probably relieved that the death penalty is not being pursued. As the judge starts to deliver his decision, he sits quietly behind his attorney, but his peace of mind is going to be brief. Unfortunately for Dorfin, Indonesian courts have the reputation for occasionally going over and beyond what the prosecutor requests, and presiding judge Isu Samsul is especially tense in this instance.
Dakwaan ini menjatuhkan pidana pada terdakwa Dorfin Felix oleh karena itu dengan pidana mati.
He gives Dorfin the death penalty and drops the gavel severely. Dorfin's eyes narrow as the judge's words finally register. Then he seems to yell something furiously to his attorney before getting up and walking out of the courtroom with a dejected expression. Eventually, he challenges the decision. Fortunately, the death penalty is reduced to 19 years in jail. There were examples of harshest sentences being revoked in the Western world. Let's take this for example. Jeff Mazinski. In 1996, Mazinski was caught by police as he tried to sell 3 kilograms of marijuana to a dealer connected to Mexican drug cartels. Unluckily for the Missouri man, he already had 2 previous drug-related offenses dating back over a decade. This meant that under a Missouri law for persistent drug offenders, a sentence of life with no parole was allowed, despite the fact that Jeff's record was non-violent. Incredibly, Jeff began his life sentence in the same year that California legalized marijuana for medical use. Jeff and his family advocated for clemency throughout the years, gathering nearly 400,000 signatures on a change.org petition. However, their efforts are in vain, and Jeff stays behind bars. Nonetheless, he conducts frequent interviews from prison, sharing his thoughts that he was handled unfairly and should be given another chance.
Justice is supposed to be fair and equal. In my case, I don't think it was.
Jeff grows emotional as he considers the most significant things he has missed out on during his more than 20 years in prison for nothing more than marijuana use.
Found that out about a month ago. I got grandkids I've never seen.
After years of lobbying and campaigning, the Mizwanwi's family efforts eventually pay off in 2015 when Mizine appeals to legislation in a local TV interview, drawing Governor Jay Nixon's attention to the matter. For Jeff, what comes next is like a light at the end of a very long tunnel. Prior to his departure from office, Governor Nixon pledges to examine the situation. See the amazing scene when he is released from prison after serving more than 20 years. Zaire Duffy is another prisoner who is aware of the risk of repeatedly committing crimes. In an intriguing analogy, despite the fact that his offenses are far more serious than Minzai's, he has been given more opportunities than the pot dealer ever had.
I gave you an opportunity. I gave you more than one opportunity. I gave you more opportunities than maybe I should have, because look at where we're here today. You put people's lives at risk, and I'm not going to allow that to happen anymore under my watch.
Duffy has been to the Ohio Lorraine Municipal Court so many times that Judge Raymond Yurs is simply sick of seeing him. He has a 5-year history of drug-related charges. Duffy has been granted several opportunities by Judge Yurs, but he is back in court today following his arrest for parole violations. Furthermore, it isn't a misdemeanor. When deputies attempted to arrest the 25-year-old on a different warrant, he led them on a fast-paced vehicle pursuit. When the pursuit came to a conclusion, cops found a Ruger 3R40 handgun and significant amounts of heroin and fentanyl. Unsurprisingly, Donna Freeman, the assistant prosecutor, wants Duffy taken off the streets.
Judge, the state would ask that you sentence this defendant to the maximum amount of time allowed by law. He pled guilty to 8 separate cases, as you are aware. He has no regard for society. He has no regard for the police. He has posted on Facebook F12, which means F the police.
Duffy takes his opportunity to make one last appeal to the judge. The professional criminal sobs like a baby, which is a sharp contrast to his cruel image.
I was doing good. They just made me look like a monster. The person they just made me out to be, I'm scared of that person that they just trying to make me out to be. You heard, I was doing good out there. I was not selling drugs. I was doing none of that.
Duffy's dramatic performance devolves into a display of complete disdain as the judge is informed of his lengthy sentence, and he turns his back on him. His lawyer's face says it all. He gives the defendant a warning glance and a few hushed remarks, which Duffy dutifully disregards. However, Yurs gets the parting shot as Duffy is led away.
The total sentence would be for 13 years and 4 months. That's
How
right.
is this a justice system, right?
It's justice because I gave you more opportunities. I'm talking right now. Oh, you don't, do you? Okay, there you go. So long, pal.
For Duffy, the story doesn't end there though. His 13-year-old sentence was solely related to his parole being revoked. He's sentenced at a later date for the car chase and possession of the drugs and firearms, earning him a further 22 and 2 years in federal prison, where he'll have plenty of time to brush up on those acting skills. If you want to see more questionable cops and insane arrests, click the next video on screen.